Welcome, everybody, to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Jesse Weber. Alex Murdaugh faced more grueling questioning on Friday as the state wraps up its cross-examination of the former attorney accused of killing his wife Maggie and son Paul. All eyes were once again on Murdaugh as he and lead prosecutor Creighton Waters faced off. Waters played multiple clips from Murdaugh's first interview with SLED agents just after he discovered the bodies of his wife and son. And we now know that Murdaugh lied to the investigators, saying that he was asleep on the couch and never came down to the kennels where Maggie and Paul were gunned down.
At what point did you decide to lie?
I'm not sure, but it was in that.
It was in this interview?
I believe that it was.
Okay. Was this interview where you're sitting in the front seat, correct?
It is.
You're not in custody, correct?
I'm not in custody.
They're giving you water, letting you chew tobacco, treating you politely, correct?
They were treating me very politely.
So what was it that clicked? So you said in this interview that it clicked that I'm going to lie about the most important fact that I know?
I'm not sure exactly when in it that I lied, decided to lie, but I believe it was during this interview. Don't talk to anybody without a lawyer. Partners all told me that, or a lot of my partners told me that. My dear friend, Chief Alexander, was one who said that. I overheard, I believe it was Sheriff Hill, I'm not positive, I overheard him tell, I believe, Mark Ball or Gray Holmes, don't let him talk to anybody without a lawyer. And what I believe is that based on my distrust of SLED and getting in that interview, and I'm not positive about this, but I believe when he asked me, you know, about my relationship with my wife and my son, I believe that's when I decided to lie. I believe those guys were trying to help me. I believe they cared about me. I believe they thought that I was in a condition such that I shouldn't talk to anybody. I mean, those guys had to prop me up, help me get myself together just to be able to go talk to David Owens. I mean, they were trying to help me. But before that, that was just one of the many things that I believe led to that situation sitting in there where those paranoid thoughts came to me.
During Thursday's testimony with his own legal team, Murdaugh admitted to being at his estate's kennels with Maggie and Paul, who he sometimes referred to as Paw Paw. Now, multiple witnesses identified Murdaugh's voice on a video that Paul took just before the murders, despite Murdaugh telling investigators multiple times in multiple interviews that he didn't go down to the kennels on June 7th. Now, the prosecutor wanted to know why Murdaugh didn't come clean any time before he was put on the stand.
Before yesterday, did you ever bring up what you told this jury about that kennels to anybody in the prosecution or anybody in law enforcement?
No, I didn't have the opportunity to, Mr. Waters, because you would not respond to my invitations to reach out and tell you about all the things that I'd done wrong. And to talk about bringing this to a head, to talk about bringing this to closure. I understand how many people I hurt. I understand how angry my partners are and how hurt they are. And I understand how hurt these people that I stole money from are. I understand how hurt they are. And one of the things that I believe is getting past this may help them get some closure. And so since at least January, I've been trying to sit down with y'all, to talk to y'all.
Okay.
And never, ever got a response to the multiple requests.
Multiple requests?
Yes, sir, multiple requests.
All right, time to break it down. Joined by my co-host, legal analyst, defense attorney Brian Buckmeyer, former trial attorney Terry Austin. It's good to have you both here. Terry, I'll start with you. Murdaugh gave multiple excuses for lying about his whereabouts. Do you think the jury believes those excuses?
I don't think so. I mean, he keeps changing the story. First, he said he was paranoid because of the opioids. Okay. Then he said when he was doing that interview, at first he wasn't going to lie, but then he decided he wanted to lie because they were asking him questions about his wife and his son and the relationship. not good. And then he said he distrusted SLED. Why? Why does he distrust them? He's a police officer, or he's a former officer of the court, and so he should not be distrusting these people. You know, and then basically he just said he didn't think it would promote the investigation of the case. Well, of course it would. Then he said his law partners, you know, advised him not to say anything. The bottom line is, he is guilty, and this is consciousness of guilt, and this is why he lied.
Well, that's Terry's point of view. Brian, I go to you. You didn't think, we spoke about this, you didn't think the cross-examination by Creighton Waters was that good, right?
I think it was horrible.
Really?
I think when it comes to cross-examination, you got one or two things. Either you're going to lock them in with yes or no questions, and you're really going to box them into showing that, hey, this guy is not just a liar, because it's clear he's a liar, but he murdered his wife and son. The other thing, I was giving him the benefit of the doubt until he finished his cross-examination, and Terry actually gave me this analogy that I thought this was going to be like giving him rope till he hangs himself, like we saw in the Robert Durst case with the cross-examination, where the prosecutors gave him all the rope in the world and then came back and slammed over their head with his own words. But it looked like Alex Murdaugh was kind of dancing through between raindrops. I know he's a liar, but I'm not convinced that he's actually a murderer.
Okay, see, this is still up for debate. This is why I think there's going to be a hung jury, and I'll tell you what. Law and Crime, the Law and Crime Network, is your home for gavel-to-gavel coverage of the Alex Murdaugh trial. You can watch live streams from inside the courtroom, hear expert insight from legal professionals like Terry and Brian, and you can see information like timelines, exhibits. It's all on lawandcrime.com and every day here on Law and Crime Daily. We're going to be right back with more coverage of Alex Murdaugh's testimony. Welcome back, everybody. So we're back now with continuing coverage of Alex Murdaugh's testimony in his double murder trial. You see, Murdaugh decided to take the stand on Thursday, and he admitted during direct examination that he had an opioid addiction for around 20 years, that he had been stealing from his law firm and clients for at least a decade, and that he had lied to just about everyone. But he adamantly denied having anything to do with Maggie and Paul's murders. When Creighton Waters began cross-examination, he hammered Murdaugh about the money that he stole from his clients, people who were vulnerable after life-changing accidents, who needed the money coming to them in settlements. Murdaugh and Waters sparred several times over everything from facts to semantics.
But you can't tell us one time where it just sticks out in your memory where you're like, I'm pulling a fast one right now.
Oh, no.
Or anything, whatever reaction you had. You can't remember a single one?
No, sir, that's not correct. I can remember a lot of times where I lied to my clients, I misled my clients, and I stole money from my clients in conversations. But for me to sit and tell you that I had a conversation about this particular document, I don't dispute it.
I know you don't dispute it, Mr. Murdaugh. You've said that 100 times, haven't you? But you can't recall for this jury one of these people looking them in the eye while you lied to them. You can't recall a single one. I've asked you this 3 times now.
Oh, I promise you.
Ask and answer.
Your Honor, asked and answered 3 times.
Well, here. Here you go, Mr. Waters.
I mean, the point's made, isn't it, Mr. Murdaugh?
I don't know if your point's made or not, but here's
You don't know that either, do you?
Here's what I will say again. I remember lying to clients of mine. I did it on more than one occasion. I took their money when I shouldn't have taken it. I'm sure that I looked them in the eye. I'm sure that I misled them. But I can't tell you exactly when those occurred 12 years ago, is the only point. I don't dispute that they occurred. I don't dispute that everything about what I did was wrong. But I can't sit and tell you the specific details that you're wanting me to give you.
It's safe to say that there is a long weekend ahead as the country ponders 2 days of testimony from Alex Murdaugh. And while we can't read the minds of the jurors in the courtroom, we have the second best thing, and that is the court of public opinion. So we set up a poll on our YouTube live stream, and here's what you, our viewers, had to say. 66% of you believe that Murdaugh is guilty. 11% of you say he's not guilty. 15% think that there's going to be a hung jury, and 7% are still undecided. Now, we do have some time before the jury has to make that decision, but our boots on the ground have a clear shot of that jury box. So let's listen in as Law and Crime's very own Gigi McKelvey and South Carolina attorney Joe McCullough share their observations from inside the courtroom as Murdaugh took the stand for the second day.
It's hard to tell. I mean, for the most part, it's very much poker face, but you do see these little subtle things. I mean, for instance, yesterday, a lot of people have been talking about that passing of the tissue. I mean, is that just kind of like an instinct to do it? Or was it, hey, man, you're sobbing. I feel bad for you. Here's a tissue. It's hard to tell if they're buying it or not. You see frustration kind of come in waves across that jury, depending on the line of questioning. But as far as what they're thinking, man, I wish I could hop in their brains for a hot second for sure.
Well, I think that the jury is going to take into account, and they'll certainly be reminded by the defense in closings, this is a fellow who came upon a family slaughtered, and he was not asked by the investigator, tell me in chronological order, in perfect order, what you did, when you did it, and exactly what you said. That's not the way things happen. Police officers, as a matter of fact, when they're involved in the shooting, they get a 24-hour hiatus before they're interviewed about the shooting to give them time to collect their thoughts. So kind of a different standard for witnesses or victims in crimes, people who come upon things. So I think the jury's not going to give much credence to that quote-unquote problem. But I think what's happening in there now about when the big lie got invented and tightening this timeline and challenging military restraint, that's going to help the prosecution.
Sir, we're coming to the end of the case. One thing we haven't talked about is the performance of the judge. How do you think Judge Newman performed during the course of this case?
He's one of my favorite judges. He's been on the bench since 2000. He'll be on the bench till 27 because he's been reelected. He runs a very tight court. He's done a lot of high-profile cases. One of them was the Walter Scott case, which you might recall. He was shot in the back. He was stopped for a broken brake light. And this case, I think he's running a tight ship. One thing you know about Judge Newman, he is not going to make any sort of preemptory decision. He wants to see the evidence. He wants to hear the questions. Then he'll make a learned decision. The other thing is he knows the case law. So he makes his decision based on what the law is. And I really like that. And he has developed a great reputation.
So, Brian, you know what I'm going to ask you. You're seeing, if you were defense counsel here, you see the jury, you're hearing your client, you're hearing the cross-examination. How would you be feeling right now?
I'm feeling good. I know you put up those numbers in that chart there, Jesse, but for the 4 different categories, but in my mind, I see 2 things. I see 2/3 of people who have watched this trial like a hawk and a lot more information that the jury probably hasn't heard, and they say guilty. And everyone else, 1/3, is saying not guilty. At this point, I think the defense only has to get up there and strongly explain this is not about innocent or guilty. This is about whether or not the prosecution has proven this case beyond a reasonable doubt. You explain that reasonable doubt thoroughly to them, and I think this is a hung jury. I can't see a guilty verdict through all this confusion. I think they've got a good case.
I think a hung jury. I don't anticipate an acquittal across the board, but I've been wrong before. We will wait and see. Brian, Terry, thank you both so much. Everyone, thanks for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.